How did you get into music?
I think a lot of us growing up as kids, you get to listening to something on the radio, and no matter what generation you're in, and you get motivated, and you get. To me, it was all about the Beatles.
Mm-hmm,
I'm in my mid 60s, and when I all of a sudden, I'm listening to this band, and I'm watching these guys and going, oh man, this stuff is great, and I bought all their records, and when I was young, and I wanted to play like John Lennon and George Harrison, and I wanted to play those Beatles songs, so that's where I started, So they talked my dad into getting me my first guitar, and I started learning some Beatles tunes, but then, of course, it went, like music does.
mm-hmm.
If you're going to stick with it, it goes in all kinds of different directions. But that's how I started, and that was like 12, 13 years old, and it was the Beatles that got me started.
Wow. Who are your favorite blues artists, and I guess how did you get into blues guitar playing?
Well, let me tell you how I got into blues.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was. It's funny. I was always playing blues.
Mm-hmm.
As I got to be a more seasoned guitar player,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize I was playing blues licks.
Mm-hmm.
I was into Clapton, and I was into Hendrix,
Mm-hmm.
and Jimmy Page, and the basic 1970s, 1960s, 1970s rock, which was blues based.
Mm-hmm.
We know now that the Beatles played some blues,
Mm-hmm.
and the Stones, and so anyways, I'm like years later. And Brant, I'm going way forward now. I'm guiding
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
a couple of rock stars from Survivor, the rock group Survivor.
Oh yeah, okay.
Okay, so Frankie Sullivan, the guitar player's in the boat, and Jim Peterick, and those guys wrote "Eye of the Tiger" and some other stuff, and
Uh-huh.
they love to fish. And
Uh-huh.
I'm guiding this back when I was still guiding,
Uh-huh.
and they started talking guitars.
Uh-huh.
And they knew me as a fisherman. They didn't know anything about my guitar playing,
Uh-huh.
and they mentioned something about strats, and they were talking about the model numbers, and the long and the short of it is all of a sudden I chimed in on with on this guitar discussion. They both stopped and turned around and said, what do you know about guitars?
Uh-huh.
And I said, I used to play. And they're going, oh yeah, right.
Uh-huh.
Anyways, along the shore, they were kidding me and all this stuff, and like,
Uh-huh.
you got to be some kind of a hack guitar player, and those guys are they're funny guys, and they're full of humor, and they're always giving you digs and stuff, so you got to dig them back, otherwise,
Yeah,
it's going to be a long day. Long and the short of it is, after a day of fishing, I'm dropping these guys off, and Frankie Sullivan goes, come on in here, Jolly. He says, I want to see what you can do. I haven't played guitar in 15 years. It's like, get in here. He said, come in, my little studio in the basement. They have a little place up there in Eagle River, Wisconsin. So I walk down the basement, and Frankie's wailing away. And my cameraman comes downstairs, and he's filming this. And I'm going, oh, man, I'm going to look like I'm going to be completely embarrassed here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So long and the short of it is, Frankie will lay something out, and he's just kind of, he's just doodling around. Then he hands me the guitar, hands me a Strat, and I start playing stuff, and I add a little Eddie Van Halen, rock to it, that two-handed tapping technique. And he looked at me and went, there was probably 10 expletives in there, and he said, he looks at all the guys in the room. He goes, this guy can actually play. and I was as rusty as could be, but he says, and then we're sitting down having a brew afterwards. He says, Johnny, you're a blues player, because I'm playing licks on his guitars and stuff, and we're just messing around there. And he goes, everything you play is like blues based. I said, really?
Uh-huh.
He says, yeah, you're a blues player. So he really identified me as a blues player, and then I went back and started going, okay, if I'm a blues player, who am I? Who are my influences? And I realized, geez, Eric Clapton. I love Clapton.
Mm-hmm.
He's a blues guy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You look at Jimi Hendrix, and I loved Hendrix. I played Hendrix all through high school and grade school and into college. And, just playing, Red House is a blues tune, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is what happened, Brant. I started recognizing, so then I started walking this back and educating myself. And where I'm going with this is, who are my favorite blues players? I started going, oh man, Stevie Ray. Yeah, Stevie Ray is Stevie Ray, but geez, Albert King sounds an awful lot like Stevie Ray. And I'm going, hey, that lick is an Albert King lick. That's not a Stevie Ray lick. Everybody thinks that's a Stevie Ray lick, but that's an Albert King lick. And then I started really getting into the Alberts and BB and everything else, and I just studied those electric blues players, including T-Bone Walker. I love all those guys, and I play them all the time. I listen to them all the time. Those guys were, those guys would, and Buddy Guy, all those guys had, those guys, they didn't even have the electronics, so to speak, that we have. That the generation after them had, and they still did a wonderful job at that stuff. So my favorite players of yesteryear, I guess, the first thing that comes to mind, outside of the rock blues guys like Hendrix and Clapton, Jimmy Page, the guys I listened to, and let's face it, I know I'm rambling here, but gee whiz, the Zeppelin was super bluesy. Super bluesy, I just didn't know it was blues. I didn't know it. I thought it was Led Zeppelin, rock and roll. No, this was blues. And I'm crazy about Albert Collins and Albert King, and T-Bone Walker, and today my favorite blues players today, a lot of these guys, a lot of people don't even know who they are. Like Jimmy Thackeray. I think Jimmy Thackeray's an amazing player. I mean, I think he's amazing. I'm sure you know a lot more about Jimmy Thackeray than I do, but everything I've heard with Jimmy Thackeray is like the guy can literally play anything with anybody, anywhere at the same time. He's just got this blues to him that's just like, it's just awesome. But there's a lot of great blues players. I just love what I love about blues guitar is that it's just so spontaneous and emotional, and it's so feel based too. It's instead of taking a note from one place and stepping it up by touching the next note like most jazz players do, for example, the blues player bends it there, or bends it down into perfect pitch. And I think that's something that makes them so unique. And I think when rock guys have that blues, even when rock guys have that blues influence or that background, even when they don't even know they do, their playing is so emotional and so good. I mean, I think that's what makes Carlos Santana and Neil Schon and guys like that so good, is the way they can bend strings. Don't you?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Does fishing influence your songwriting?
Yes, in fact, I have actually written a lot of music, blues based, and like scenery or mood based for my TV show. All the music on my TV series, as you know now probably, from seeing some of my stuff, it's all mine. But you can hear all the guys we just talked about. You can hear it all over that music. But I write a lot of my music that when I film an episode, I see and feel mood style blues to a lot of it. And high energy stuff, I'm sure if you've checked some of my stuff out, there's places where high energy kind of a rock thing is the way to go. Right. But when you get into scenics and wildlife and slipping into a quiet bay in your castle, it's got this blues fusion sound to it, and it's a slow blues, and I can write to that all day. In fact, the last 3 numbers, I by the way, I'm connected with this fisherman in Nashville that does all of my drums and bass parts for me, and keyboard parts. Yeah, and we connected through fishing. Wow. And we became friends as fishing, by fishing, and musky fishing in particular. And he says, hey, if you ever need any background tracks or whatever, backing tracks, he says, I can do them for you. He plays on a lot of records. Most people don't even know who he is. His name is Stephen Paul, by the way. And that's Stephen Paul's my backing track guy for all my music.
Wow. Do you write for specific episodes, or it just is kind of all by feel, or like you'll have an idea and then, oh, this will fit into this episode or this, or just kind of?
Well, here's how the TV end of it goes.
Uh-huh.
Is you know, in fact, I need to walk you back. Is the reason I started writing my own and producing my own music. First of all, because I could play, it became a natural thing. But I'm fishing with Frankie Sullivan from Survivor, and he says, you ought to get in the studio with a few of your friends. He says, and you can, instead of trying to pay and trying to get rights to use all these backing tracks for your show, which, by the way, in TV business, it's just as bad as it is in the radio business, where BMI and ASCAP, these guys are, they're monitoring what you use for music underneath your TV series. And he says, you might as well do your own thing. Then you have your own signature. And I thought, geez, I don't know if I could do this or not, but I'll give it a try. And so I produced a few pieces. I produced a few of them, by the way, with Frankie.
Oh, wow.
And it became a signature of our show. And then people started asking, who's playing this music? Where is this music coming from? And so that became kind of eventually I ended up doing some live performances, and got a group together and started doing live performances, and showcasing some of this music. But what ends up happening in a lot of cases, Brant, is for example, Stephen Paul, my friend from Nashville, will send me he says, I have a cold, rainy day today. I'm cutting some backing tracks. I'm gonna send you six or four or six of them. He says, and if you like one, he says, you can build something off of it and maybe it'll work in your show. And that's kind of how a lot of it happens. And once in a while also, I'll just say, I really need a minor blues, in this kind of this slow tempo, and I'll play something, really, really rough, and I'll just send it to him on a cell phone. And he'll go, okay, give me a couple hours, I can work with that. And I'll get something back, and then, with modern day computers and electronics, you can just plug it into your GarageBand, for example, and go, okay, let me find an amp that I like and an effect that I like, and I plug my guitar in and go, and I start playing something to it, and it's like, ooh, this is going to work in this particular part of my show. And that I build a library of that stuff, and my editor starts dropping those things in and go, what do you think of this? And it's like, it's okay, but then the next one you'll drop it and go, hey, this really works. This is really good. Wow. And then what we do, by the way, Brant, is we end up building the edits in the TV show around the music.
Oh, wow. Okay, interesting.
So, so if, for example, I'll pitch and open to the show, hey, today, folks, we're on the Mississippi River, and we're fishing largemouth in the backwaters, and, these are the lures we're going to use, and stick around, for the action, and we'll transition, and then, we'll build the open music in there, with just like a little bass track and something very soft, and then when that transition happens, that's where we transition up on the guitars and the music to build the kind of the momentum and the excitement, and then we will keep that scenic, for example, in until it works with the transition of the music. So the music ends up being a very important part of the show from our perspective. A lot of folks don't see it, but the musicians like you would notice it. It's fun because it takes it in a whole different dimension. It's we're actually, instead of saying, okay, we need a 5-second transition here, so give me a scenic of a heron taking off or an eagle overhead. We'll go, okay, this music piece right here is 11 seconds or 13 seconds or whatever. Says, let's carry the scenic that long, or even slow-mo it. Or even a drone shot, for example, of a beautiful scenic of Colorama this time of the year. We'll just use the drone and use it long enough so that the music works perfect in it. It's a creative, it's a creative nature. My editor gets most of the credit for this because, he's really the guy that also a musician, which helps, right?
Yeah, for sure. The creativity.
You got it.
For people who are new to musky fishing, what do they need to know, and where should they start? I figure this is going to be kind of like a new interview, fishing and a blues thing, so I'm assuming a lot of these people may not know about musky fishing.
Well, musky fishing muskie fishing is like the ultimate challenge, Brant, in terms of when I grew up fishing, and for example, what I'm doing over here in Mississippi, I'm over in the Mississippi in western Wisconsin this fall, and there aren't any muskies, so I'm basically bass fishing and pike fishing and walleye fishing, and when you go out for bass, you go for pike, you go for walleyes, you go for panfish, you go out expecting to catch fish and catch numbers of fish and trying to locate schools of fish. When you're muskie fishing, you're hunting for one fish. They're harder to catch, much harder to find, much harder to trigger. They're bigger, stronger, and much harder to catch. So the muskie fishing, for those readers, those listeners that are already anglers that want to take their fishing in a whole different direction in the freshwater game, and all over North America now, all over most of North America now, they're believe it or not, there are muskies in a lot of these waters now, even where there weren't even 15 years ago. So the muskie fishing thing, muskies are a very unique fish, and you fish them, so it's a lot of work.
Oh yeah.
It's physically a lot of work. It's also a mental drain. It's a mental challenge. It's a mental strain to keep yourself active and in the game and doing all the right things. And kind of like, it's very much like the unappreciated bass player and drummer. You got to keep doing everything right, and you got to stay on time and in rhythm all the time with muskies, because you never know when. You don't know when you're going to get that one opportunity, and you usually get one opportunity on any given day. You may not, and on a real good day, you might get a few. But on the best days, you're only going to get a couple shots at a fish like this. But it's well worth it, because it's like, it's the ultimate freshwater experience to catch a real big muskie. I ended up specializing my game later in my career, Brant, in muskies, and creating a muskie app. I don't know if you've seen our app, by the way.
Oh, the 360?
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. Okay, the guy who edits and runs the app is Stephen Paul, my buddy from Nashville.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The studio musician from Nashville. And by the way, if you ever want to experience some really cool muskie fishing and take a ride, and you being a musician, you would love this. Is to go fishing with Steve on the off months, like November, December, January, February, March, April, when Pennsylvania's wintry, right?
Yeah.
You go down there, and it's like there's muskies all over these mountain lakes in eastern Tennessee and West Virginia, and you can catch some beautiful muskies out there, and it's a lot of fun. But I probably got off the track a little bit, but the muskie thing is the ultimate challenge. And if you're going to go after muskies, one of the first things you got to do is make sure that you outfit yourself correctly, learn the game, and learning the game means, watching some videos, reading some things, and watching how these guys do it, and understanding when you put that boat in the water and you're out there fishing, that you're not out there to catch a bunch of fish. You're out there to do everything you can to have one opportunity at one. They're hard to catch, and you know that.
Is there a muskie bait or brand that equates to the Fender or Gibson brand in the guitar world?
Well, I'm kind of biased there because I have my own brand.
Yeah, well, market yourself. Here's the time.
Well, I started. It's called Joe Bucher Outdoors now, but I started the Bucher brand. My wife and I, again by accident, when I was guiding, I started hand making some baits because I wasn't happy with, not that a lot of the products out there back in the 60s and early 70s didn't catch muskies, but I wanted things wanted things made a little different from a durability standpoint, from a functionality standpoint. So I started making my own spinners. That's how it started, Bucher Tail. In fact, I didn't even name the lure Bucher Tail. One of my clients named it a Bucher Tail. And one of my clients caught a big fish on one of these baits, and back then, you kept muskies, and it was on display, and the local sport shop guy said, "Hey, if you're going to display this lure in my freezer in town, and you're going to call it a Bucher Tail," he says, "we got to have some lures to sell." And I thought, oh boy, I I mean, I can make one of these, but to make 10 of them or 100 of them.
Yeah.
And so Beth and I, my wife and I, with $200 on a credit card, bought some materials and started Joe Bucher Tackle Company. And now, we're one of the, if not the largest musky lure manufacturers in the world. And now we make, crankbaits, top water lures, the depth raider, the shallow raider, the Bucher tail, the slot master spinner baits. We have this entire line of products, and all of those lures, by the way, were built as tools for a situation. So I built an entire family of lures. And is it like I think it's very much like I think my company is very much like a fender. In other words, it's a Strat. It's a working man's guitar. It's a Telecaster. I love Telecasters and Strats. I have Gibson ES335s. I've got some Les Pauls. Those are wonderful guitars. But I'm thinking, the Telecaster, the Stratocaster, the working man's guitar, Bucher tails, depth raiders, shallow raiders, top raiders that's very much Fenderish.
Cool. Can you talk about your biggest muskie and how many muskies have you caught, if you had to estimate, over your career?
Well, that's an interesting thing you should say, because over time, I never really counted all of them. But if you figure, back when I was guiding, I averaged over 200 fish per year.
Wow.
For 26 years, I've caught thousands. Caught, the benchmark of the big muskie today is 50 inches. I've caught hundreds over 50 inches. And I don't say any of these things to brag. It's just part of the history of what happened. Years ago, Brant, we kept muskies, so everything, even all the world records were established by weight. And then there became a time, a big transition, so to speak, where catch and release became a huge thing, not only in muskie fishing, but in fishing in general. And the world record, the Fishing Hall of Fame and the world record keepers even made a class of catch and release world records. And then those catch and release world records were all by length. So today, unlike yesteryear, today it's all about length. And so, my longest muskie is 57 inches. Wow. But my heaviest muskie is probably shorter than that, but it was a fall fish. So depending upon the time of the year that you catch them, they may, for example, early in the year, right after they spawn, they're going to be the thinnest. In the late fall or even early winter, for example, if you go down and fish with my friend in Nashville in the winter, those fish are going to be heavy down there because they're all fattened up. And that same fish, 3 months later, might be thin. And that 57 I caught wasn't overly heavy. In fact, it had a head like a big alligator.
Wow.
I mean, literally, you could put a basketball in his mouth.
Jesus.
It was so, it was just, and fish, by the way, fish that big are dangerous and scary even to handle because they're so powerful and strong. And that fish tore my shoulder up.
Wow.
It took me years to recover from a shoulder injury just lifting and handling that fish for a photograph.
Wow.
So I don't know if I answered your question properly, but, I've caught lots of them. And it's just been through an experience of learning and being there. And, in the muskie fishing world, I still think that every muskie is special because they're so hard to catch and they're kind of precious fish but those big ones are special. They're special. You know what? By the way, I was out in the Mississippi River here, and big northern pike. Now you're a fisherman, so big northern pike are hard to find, especially if you're not in Canada. Big northern pike are hard to find. And arguably, in some waters, in most of the waters in the lower 50, they're harder to catch and harder to find a really big northern pike than even a muskie. And I caught my biggest northern pike last week.
Really? Wow.
Yes,
Congratulations.
and it was muskie sized, Brant. It was like 45 inches long.
Holy crap.
And I know. It's a holy Schmidt moment.
Yeah, Jesus
It was like, when I hooked it, it was like, oh my gosh. My wife, when she was fishing me, she went, that's a muskie. I said, it's not a muskie. It's actually a pike, but it was muskie sized.
Wow.
So, you know, big fish of any caliber, no matter what your readers, what anglers fish for. Big fish are really special, and big pike are special, big bass are special. And but fishing, isn't it interesting how fishing is such a therapeutic thing?
Yeah.
And blues, and the music, and the mood of blues, and fishing. Sometimes it's like you could take the two and put them together. It's like, man, even on your worst days, if you can get out on the water and just be casting and listen to a little blues music, I mean, it can it soothes the soul, so to speak, right?
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. And the last question, I guess you've kind of accomplished everything, but is there anything else you want to accomplish, or anything else that you want to do that you haven't done?
I am so fortunate to have had a career that I've had, and that the fishing world has been so good to me, and being able to tie the music into my fishing with television has been such a wonderful thing that if I died tomorrow, I can say I died a happy man, because I've been, God has blessed me with health and some great friends and the ability to play music and go fishing. So I'm a pretty lucky guy. What I want to do the rest of my life is try to help others. Try to I have I don't know if you know or not, but I do this big blues festival in northern Wisconsin every summer. I don't know if you know this or not.
No, I had no idea.
Oh, this is something that your blues audience needs to know. I created the biggest music event in northern Wisconsin 21 years ago.
Wow.
And it's a blues festival. It's not a country fest. It's a blues festival. I have blues artists from all over the 3-state area by us come up, and it's totally nonprofit. It's for raising funds for scholarships and for funding youth sports programs up by us, and we fund, for example, purchasing music equipment for the high schools and grade schools, and it's become a huge event. And all of my volunteers that work it's a blues fest, by the way. It's a barbecue festival, and it's a silent auction thing. So we have these 3 things going, and all the money at the end of the night, all the money goes to the community and for kids. And all my volunteers are teachers, coaches, parents, and the musicians. We make sure that they're paid, because these folks are trying to make a living at this stuff. So we make sure they're paid. And half the time, these musicians are donating, giving us special breaks on fees and stuff to get us there, so they can be part of this whole thing. And it's you might want to check that out. I even have a Facebook page dedicated to it. It's called Joe Bucher's Bluesfest on Facebook.
Okay. Yeah, that's a link to the article.
Yeah, that would be fun, because our blues. What's really cool about it, and you'll totally appreciate this is when I first of all, I created this blues festival because I wanted to do this, but I had a lot of locals say, "Well, why don't you do a country thing?" Or, I said, "Well, Rhinelander, Wisconsin got this big Ho-Day country fest." No, I says, "I want to do something different. I want you to do a rock fest." I said, "No, I want to do. I love blues, and I want to introduce this northern Wisconsin audience, which is also, by the way, heavily tourist based. So I get a lot of Chicago, Minneapolis, Milwaukee people up there, and so those people all love blues. And so, it didn't take long. In about 4 or 5 years, we had one heck of a music venue up there.
Wow.
And I've got a list of groups every year that they can't wait to play for. There's and we've got barbecue fest. We got competition barbecue teams that come up and cook the food and everything. It's, you eat good, you listen to great music, and at the end of the day, I'll cut a check for $35,000 to $50,000 at the end of the night and give it to the community. Nice. And it's closely monitored, by the way, and I don't make a penny on any of it. In fact, I donate heavily to it as well. And get this, all the people I'm involved with in the fishing business donate to the silent auctions and everything, so that there's all kinds. When people are at this event, they're winning stuff, they're buying stuff, they're eating barbecue, and they're listening to blues music all weekend.
Lines in the water, reel in the bait. Big Musky follows a figure 8. Nothing seems to strike. Change the color, change the shape. Walleye pattern to Concord grape. You might get lucky. No fish all day will give you the blues. No fish all day will give you the blues. Bodies boiling from the heat. 10,000 casts within this week. No prime time slime. There's pain in your shoulders, your back is hurting. Your legs on fire, everything's burning. Need some ice cold beer. No fish all day will give you the blues. No fish all day will give you the blues. No fish all day will give you the blues.